Thank you so much for coming to the Access to Justice Genius Panel put on by the American Legal Technology Awards. I'm so happy to have you here, and it's going to be a fabulous discussion. I want to thank our sponsor, ROG Legal Insurance. ROG has actually been with us since the very beginning of the American Legal Technology Awards, which, if you can believe it, this is the 6th year. So it's really amazing to have them here to support us. Thank you so much, ROG Legal Insurance. And so the topic for today is access to justice in the AI era. And with that, I want to thank all of the panelists so much for being here, and especially you, Kat. Thank you so much for leading it. You have the floor.
Hey, everybody. It is good to see you this morning, afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us. I am going to not say anything else because we are here to learn from our genius guests. And as Tom said, the topic is access to justice in the AI era. Way too much to cover in the short time we have together, but we're going to start with an introduction. So you all just are reintroduced to our geniuses today. Amanda, would you kick us off, please?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Amanda Brown. I'm the founder and executive director of Lagniappe Law Lab based in New Orleans, Louisiana. And yeah, we provide access to justice at scale in Louisiana.
Thank you, Amanda. And Scheree, passing the mic to you.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. I am Scheree Gilchrist, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Legal Aid of North Carolina, where I am looking at how we can use technology and other creative solutions to improve service delivery and or staff effectiveness.
Awesome. Thank you, Scheree. And Shellie, bring us home.
Hi, I'm Shellie Reid. I'm the manager of the Legal Services National Technology Assistance Project. We provide technology education and training to legal aid and legal services organizations across the country. And I'm really excited to be here and talk about access to justice because it is such an important topic. And I hope that we all learn a little bit from everyone else on the panel.
We absolutely will. Thank you, Shellie. So I know all three of you really well, and I know a little bit about all the amazing work you're doing, and I'm thrilled that you get to share that and your leadership thoughts on this topic with our audience today. I'm going to stay in alphabetical order by first name just to keep things easy. And we're going to kick off with, I think, a big question that is on a lot of people's minds. How are new technologies, particularly AI, generative AI, which is the topic du jour, how are we seeing these technologies helping people now who otherwise wouldn't have access to legal help? Amanda, what are you seeing on the ground?
Well, I think you can't really overstate the impact that it is having on folks. And I would also offer that I'd like to think it's not in the way that our profession would prefer. Realistically, what I see a lot of times is because, AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, all these models that are out there and commercialized, people are going to those sources for help instead of looking to the legal service organizations or the programs like mine or other places on the internet that offer access to legal resources because there's a really easy consolidated window for them to move into. So I think it really is having a massive impact. I've heard multiple stories from folks in my own community and social groups that I work with that said, "Oh, I had a landlord dispute, so I went to ChatGPT and asked it to write me a letter." And I was like, well, I have an app for that, but it doesn't matter because they can't find that. So I think it is having a really outsized and huge impact. And, we'll debate whether or not that's, good or bad for us. But this is only just the beginning.
So much gold to mine there. Scheree, passing the mic to you. What are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, new technology and especially AI, it's significantly transforming access to justice. From my perspective, it's removing barriers that would traditionally prevent people from getting legal help. When you think of, the ability to be able to use an AI tool like the one we developed at Legal Aid of North Carolina, LEA, to get legal information that wouldn't otherwise be easily or readily accessible to people. I think that's a change. And when you think of people in rural areas where the offices are spread out or there are very few attorneys, access to information becomes even more crucial, and not having an easy way to do that in the past was definitely limited somebody's ability to get the help they need. So that's one example. We're also seeing people, similar to what Amanda said, they're coming to us with printouts of what they have gotten from ChatGPT or other places. So I think in their minds and from our perspective as attorneys, it is translating what would otherwise be complex legal information and terms into plain language, and for some people even multiple languages. So, it's sort of reducing the need for someone to have the legal literacy that they needed to have before to understand their rights. So I think that's another example. Now, there's a whole conversation around whether or not that information is accurate, and we will probably get into that later. But I think that's one way that we're also seeing it. And then just broadly, as a legal aid organization, AI for us, it's helping us expand or capacity and help us to be able to handle the high demand that we're seeing by helping us triage cases faster, automating processes at our intake level. And so those are just some of the ways that I'm seeing it in my work.
Yeah, we're going to dig in more into that. Absolutely, Scheree. But before we do, Shellie, passing the mic to you. What have you got for us?
I think we're seeing a lot more tools that are available. People are able to use the generative AI to create tools that can help people. There have been a number of new tools that help with landlord-tenant issues, for example. There are new tools for divorce. There are just new tools coming out, seems like daily. And I think that those are a great thing, because people who would not even consider going to a lawyer are finding help online through these new tools that are available. I think the other thing is that, again, people are going to the internet and doing searches, and generative AI is there and is the first answer for almost every search engine now. So we're actually anecdotally seeing less traffic at legal help and legal aid websites. So the focus is turning to how can we make sure that the legal aid and legal help websites answers are being used for those generative AI search engines, and so that people are getting accurate information, hopefully within their state. But I think just having the access through search engines is a huge bonus for people, because otherwise, you doing just an internet search, you might have ended up on a website in Texas and you're in Illinois, for example, and the information may not be relevant. So having relevant information to your area, if you have prompted such, I think is a great benefit for people.
So definitely some common themes through this. And Shellie, I want to start with you on this next question, because Amanda alluded to this, Scheree started talking about this, and the question really is, what are we seeing the impact that AI and generative AI specifically is having on traditional providers in this space? So legal aid organizations, LSOs, the people, pro bono work. So we've been kind of hitting on the benefit to people, right? So let's flip that. What do you see? And I think, Shellie, you're well positioned because you actually train people in these organizations how to use tools and use them effectively. So what are you seeing?
I think we are seeing a huge, just like we're seeing in other industries, there are slow to adopt legal aid organizations, and there are legal aid organizations like Sheree's in North Carolina that are leading the way on how to use these tools to better the world for people who need legal assistance. But I think time is going to really tell us how these organizations adopt. funding is a huge issue. You know, we organizations are concerned about how do we pay for generative AI for their staff, but then there's also because many people who work at legal aid organizations have big hearts, not just for people, but also for the environment. And they're concerned about the environmental impact of using these tools. So I think we have a mixed bag. Once legal aid organization and staff are introduced to the possibilities of these tools, then they become more open to using them. But I think we have a long way to go. In the scheme of things of what I see, very few have actually adopted use of generative AI. Many are still in the, oh, we need to have a policy phase of this whole experiment. So long way to go to get full adoption.
Yeah, well, that's a great overview, Shellie, and thank you. And again, because of the work you do, I think you're so well positioned to speak kind of to what you see across organizations. I'm going to shift to Scheree now because I think you are still the only chief innovation officer in a legal aid organization in the US. And I think you're uniquely positioned to talk about what's happening on the ground in your organization with respect to these tools.
Right. So we took a very affirmative approach, I guess is the way to put it, by not only, creating my role, Chief Innovation Officer, but launching an innovation lab with the goal of identifying, testing, and deploying technology solutions. Around the same time that we did that, the AI explosion happened. So we launched our lab, I think in 2022, the end of 2022, and ChatGPT exploded in 2021. So I think it was ripe for us to pay attention to, but we didn't start out saying that we were going to jump headfirst into this AI pool. We were looking at how we could create greater efficiencies, how we could scale or services, how we can basically meet the demand. Our helpline at the time, we were seeing over 300,000 calls coming in. Now, those, I can't say those were unique calls, but those were calls that were hitting our line. We were serving 65,000 people in one way or the other, but we know that, with 300,000 people potentially calling and only serving 65, there's still a huge gap. So we were looking at how we could leverage technology in general. And then AI happened, and we started exploring AI solutions through the lab. And since then, we have taken a very much an AI first approach, but in a responsible way. I often say that it's not AI for the sake of AI, it's AI that's going to solve a problem that we have. So we're very careful about what we use AI for and what we don't use it for. There's some things that it's just not suited for, and so we stay away from that. And we are guided by our rules of professional responsibility. We're guided by data privacy rules. We're really taking a very conservative but very open approach to AI deployment. And with that, we've sort of adopted a bifurcated process. We're looking externally at how we can use AI to meet the needs of our clients, and then internally, what tools can we adopt to help our staff be more effective at the work that they're doing. And so we're looking at, I mentioned Leah, or chatbot that we developed with Tom and LawDroid. But we're also looking at now a new client portal that is sort of like if you think of it like a MyChart, it's a one-stop shop for legal help, but it will have AI guided navigation in there, and it will have a way to summarize our case acceptance, so it makes it easier for our staff to assess whether or not they can help. We've added some AI features on our phone. We're building an AI voice assistant to help to complement our intake team so that they can better handle that flow, because we don't have the funding, to Shelley's point, we don't have the funding to hire. And we know that we're not going to be able to hire or lawyer our way out of the demand that exists. So we have to look at different ways. But in doing that, adding AI tools up front, what we're doing is we're making it easier for people to access our services, but then there's a capacity issue or limited capacity issue on the back end. So how do we compensate for that? And that's why we've taken this bifurcated approach where we're also looking at what are some of the tools and solutions and partnerships and relationships and all the other things that will help our staff meet that increased demand and manage the inflow of cases.
So you're describing a very proactive approach, right? And what I think is brilliant about that is that you also, not only are you doing these things, but you're sharing them very generously. So I just want to point to that because for those organizations that Shellie might have been referring to who haven't yet, even figured out what their approach is, right? I think Scheree, you and your team at Lance are really providing a framework and freely
Yes.
saying to people, here, come steal, learn from what we're doing, steal and do, make this better. So I want to bookmark that because
Yeah.
I believe that you all are doing work that others can definitely learn from. Amanda. So I want to hear your response. So the original question, I feel like I should restate, but I want to
Thank
add
you.
a little lagniappe to that if I can. So the question is, what does AI mean for traditional providers, right? Legal aid, pro bono efforts, other LSOs. And then kind of the second piece of that, um, how might AI kind of disrupt our traditional system? Because this is something I know we've talked about before. And I think every day this is just getting to be a more pressing issue for us to grapple with.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect sort of question to dig into where I've been trying to organize my thoughts around all of this because I'm swimming in it. I'm not even gonna lie. To Shelley's point, like I think sometimes I even perceive like my own adoption of these tools as slow, although I would characterize it as deliberate. I think we have to get the fundamentals right before we start layering this on top of it. And I'm looking at this from a systems perspective and not necessarily just like a tactics perspective. And so that's what my observation is that I'm gonna deliberate. I'm gonna be, slow to this. I'm gonna let folks like Scheree experiment and like do the fun. I'm jealous of you because I know it's really fun, like to continue to iterate on that. But that's I think that's where I see a lot of the current work being done. It's in this like distinction between iteration and like full-blown innovation, which is like iteration to build off of things that we're already doing to make them more efficient, to make things move faster, but it's still existing within the framework that we already know and understand. But I think there's innovation that's happening, again, outside of our control that we
Mhm.
see that ultimately is flipping the paradigm of like how people interact with and engage with the legal system, a legal process that doesn't have anything to do with the sort of like um, polishing of what we, are typically doing in terms of like applying technology to access to justice. I know I'm like sounding kind of theoretical, and that's like where I live a lot of times. I'm just trying to like understand the theory and like what we're doing behind this. But I do see the immediate shift that's happened with on the consumer side is that I've said for years, oh, in access to justice, we can build all these tools, but we have a discoverability problem. People can't find that because they don't know what we're saying, what they're saying, what they need, where all these things live. Do we trust this? There's so many factors that are at play. And so that paradigm has shifted to like, oh, well, there's this one thing that sounds really kind of smart and like it's sort of good enough to get me down the road on this legal issue. That's a fundamental shift in the way that people are engaging with the process of like getting legal help. That's different from like a Google search and all the things that we can do to like make our rankings better in that like environment. But I also think like, there's opportunities for shifting the way that the resolution of a legal issue happens. So like when I think of innovation, it's sort of like who the people are that are providing the services, and like I say this in terms of like shifting the dynamic, as who the people are, what the venues are for addressing issues, and then what is the like infrastructural pieces to that are at play. So as I mentioned, I'm kind of like swimming in all this, but I think you guys get the sense that I see there's huge opportunity here, and like we're going at both, going in both lanes at the same time in terms of like how do we make what we have now better and make that better, but we also need to be thinking about how, because it's going to happen. I have no doubt that it's going to happen. Like how do we meet the moment and make sure that we're ready for these paradigm shifts that come in in a way that AI is transforming not just legal but everything.
Well, absolutely. And I think we are called upon to have a level of proactiveness that is not necessarily typical or comfortable for anyone in our profession, right? All three of you are being proactive in your own ways and in your own domains. And I'd like to turn the conversation for a moment to explore more specifically some of the work you're actually doing to leverage technology to improve access to legal help and access to justice. And we're going to go backwards again. We're going to start with Amanda because I was lucky enough to just have a conversation with you about the platform that you just launched in Louisiana. So can you talk to us a little bit about the platform and how you think it's kind of stepping up to meet some of the needs in this moment that you've identified?
Yeah, so I think I'll just the Louisiana Civil Legal Navigator is sort of our Lagniappe Law Lab's cornerstone project in partnership with the Louisiana Bar Foundation here, who does, most, if not all of our funding, depending on the year, I guess. But this partnership that we have is really about trying to create a front door to legal services. We do this. I sometimes even wonder to myself, is this the right approach? But the reality is that we're trying to build a platform approach to educating people, empowering them to act on the next step of their legal journey, and then connecting them to the legal service providers that are in our legal services ecosystem. So that's sort of our approach at the outcomes that we want to have for folks that are using the Louisiana Legal Navigator platform. And while I'll say right now, it's still very much in its like legal help website, sort of information, content focused resource, but the architecture and the structure that we're building underneath it and what the and features on top of it are really about making this sort of an extensible like environment for more stuff to happen, and sort of guide this volume of people through the appropriate levels of services that they need. So everybody needs to understand their legal issue. Everybody needs to, learn about how the law applies to them, how, do some research basically. So we really focus on, and again, like I think knowledge is power. We focus on making sure that we have good, high quality, plain language, accessible content for people. And that's sort of like the foundation, the backbone of everything else, and the way that we, organize stuff around our taxonomy that also works in the context of the self-help tools that we create. So it's about like, okay, taking this one piece and then saying, are you ready to move on with your journey? And do we have something that is appropriate? Is this an issue that's appropriate for you to manage on your own that we don't have capacity in our ecosystem to support you with? Okay, here's the next step that we can offer to you. And then realistically, the number one thing that we hear from folks is like, I just want to talk to somebody. So trying to make it as easy as possible, again, noting like capacity constraints that Sheree's talking about. I don't know, like in the existing regulatory environment, we're never going to be able to change that. But we are still trying to build pathways that make it more more efficient referrals, coordinated intake with our organizations. And what I what I hope you'll notice is that I'm not saying AI because it's not about the AI. There's AI underlying that, but this is a process and an intentional like structure that is just augmented at certain leverage points with AI. It doesn't really have anything to do with, I'm going to apply AI on this. So thinking at it from a 30,000-foot high level view and how people experience issues, what they're looking for, and how we want to get them plugged into our service delivery system is what we're focusing on, and how we're trying to use AI to improve upon the capacities, I think, of those individual points, if that is clear.
It is. And I'm so glad you shared about this with us. And I want to make a couple of points that were clear to me from what you've just said and a prior conversation we've had. One, um, this effort really is statewide. So you have amazing buy-in from LSOs and organizations that support them across the state of Louisiana. And so you really are bringing everybody together in a way that frankly I think is unusual, right? Even in a given state, a given jurisdiction, you will have different legal aid organizations kind of doing things in their own silos. And so I think this represents an effort to bring organizations and resources together in a way that is going to lead to the findability issue possibly being solved as well, right? So a common source, a funnel to a single platform. I also want to highlight that you as well are very generous, Amanda. So I would say to anyone whose interest is piqued by hearing about the work that you're doing, that you are very generous in sharing and gladly letting people learn from both what has gone well and what hasn't. Final thing I'll say, and I think this applies to the work that all three of you are doing and witnessing. So you've launched this platform and it looks like this beautiful thing that just kind of appeared overnight because suddenly it's there and a great resource. But as you've noted in the past, it was years in the making, right? And so the idea that proactivity is really critical in this moment means that folks like need to get up yesterday and start working on these things. I just want to kind of add a sense of urgency. So Scheree, thank you, Amanda, for sharing about that. And I want to jump to Scheree. So you've woven in some of your prior responses to our questions, some of the work that you all are doing. I'd ask you now, is there something you would like to share, kind of a big focus that you all have right now that might be interesting for us to learn about?
Yeah, and I think I'll take like maybe one tiny step backwards too, because something Amanda said struck me. And it is the idea that, innovation without a framework is still just an idea, right? And so to Amanda's point, it is crucial that you do have like the creativity that comes from innovation, so that constant thinking and iteration, but then that framework that guides you, right? What are you actually doing? Who is it serving? What are your metrics? What are the deliverables? What are the outcomes? All of those things are going to be necessary for you to have a sustainable model for change. The change management piece then, and which is a lot of what my time is focused on. We have other people in our lab that do sort of the day-to-day work, granular work around the AI tools and things that we're building, is getting that buy-in and then taking the work that we're doing and expanding it beyond the scope of just one entity. So Legal Aid of North Carolina is a statewide agency. It is a statewide LSC funded agency, Legal Services Corporation funded agency. So we operate statewide, all 100 counties. We have 23 offices across the state, over 400 staff. So we have a pretty large footprint in our state. But what that means for me, though, when I'm looking at sort of big system change and how we can really make a dent in the access to justice problem, it forces me to look beyond our state. How can we build a coalition or create like a national solution or a regional solution that will really help us to level that playing field and level the and create greater access for more people. So that's one thing that, that we're doing right now is really looking beyond North Carolina and looking at where can we leverage partnerships and relationships in other states, who are the players that we can form these relationships with, and those are other legal services entities. Those are academic institutions, like, we've partnered with Vail before, CAT, your program. It's also looking at these large tech companies that are out there, and how can they reinvest in the work that we're doing and leverage the tools that they're building to create a sustainable model for change. We went directly to OpenAI. We pitched them a solution that we had, and I think what it's done is planted a seed for them, because I think a legal services program coming to OpenAI and saying, we're using your tools and we would love to have this partnership with you, doesn't seem like the kind of relationship that they would be, but it's still a product. At the end of the day, their tool is still a product that they're trying to get out there. They're trying to get more people to use it. They're trying to understand how people are using it and how are the ways in which it's going to benefit people and have the economic impact that they want it to have. So by articulating, well, there's this huge need, there's this access to justice problem, here's the problem that we're trying to solve, here's the scope in which that we're trying to do it. And you can test how AI can be used in this highly regulated environment where, we're all risk averse. There are all these concerns. We've seen the headlines, the hallucinations, you name it, but we can provide you with a model or a process in which you can test whether or not your tools can really work in this environment. And so that led to a partnership with OpenAI to build out the voice assistant I mentioned, the AI voice assistant that I mentioned. And then we partnered with Harvard to test it, right? Because again, you don't want to create something that is not going to actually solve the problem that we're setting out to solve. And you don't want to have something that doesn't have clear, it's not backed by anything, right? You want to be able to point to a study or something that shows that by deploying this AI tool in this way in a legal setting, here are the measurable outcomes, here are how people will interact with it or engage with it, right or wrong, good or bad. We think it's important to be that transparent with the work that we're doing so that it can inform everybody else, anybody else really who wants to take advantage of that. So that I think is a little bit different than just the tools that we're building, which I think is really cool work. But I think that bigger, broader vision for how we can utilize AI and leverage some of these bigger partnerships and relationships to bring about change and really make a difference as it relates to access to justice is a lot of where I focus my attention.
Yes, and I think, Scheree, the project this collaboration with OpenAI that you're speaking of also goes to a point that Amanda raised earlier in the conversation, the fact that people tend to go to the thing they know, which is often ChatGPT, right? And just start asking it questions. And so I think you're describing also an opportunity to improve, hopefully, the responses of their general LLM use when people are just chatting, whether they are in a legal specific platform environment or not. Like, I see so much opportunity to come from that collaboration to really improve the effectiveness of even general tool use, right? When it comes to legal help and understanding. So it's very exciting. And Shellie, so I know you see a lot of things and you might want to respond to something specifically that Amanda and Scheree said. I also would love to know your thoughts on the question specifically about how AI might disrupt the way we've always done things in this space.
Absolutely. I do want to address Sheree's partnership with OpenAI. We're actually holding a session on Thursday about OpenAI's funding opportunity for nonprofits. So if you're interested they have a lot of funds available two nonprofits through, it's kind of a grant. They're not calling it a grant, but it's a funding opportunity. So we have that session on Thursday afternoon if you want to learn more, or of course you can go to OpenAI's website as well. Thinking about how is AI going to kind of break the mold of what we've been doing in the past, I think that we lawyers and bar association are kind of in the way of progress. So we're going to see AI and AI used for solutions. Just one example of an AI solution that I experienced in my life that I would love to have come into our space is I called a home services provider the other day. Their phone line was busy. I was given the option to switch over to a chat-based system, and it was seamless. And it's all generative AI based. We're not getting these opportunities. Nobody is marketing these tools in the legal aid, legal services space. But think about if we had that technology in the legal services space, how many more people that organizations could assist because they would have a chat-based assistant as opposed to everyone having to speak to a person, because there are many questions that can be handled through chat. If we're willing to use these systems. But again, lawyers and bar associations have to get out of the way, that fear of the unauthorized practice of law and giving legal information and legal advice, So if we are willing to let technology use its best advances and ways that it can help us, then, of course, we're going to be able to help more people. I'm not saying that it's without challenges. Absolutely not. There are things that we do have to work on. But I think that we have lots of opportunity. Historically, lawyers in general lag behind on tech adoption. For consumers, I think the balance of power is going to shift because they will have access to these solutions that appear, whether they are sanctioned or not. They're going to appear. They may get pushed out of the market by the gateholders and the gatekeepers, but they'll be there for a while. I think about, we're also going to have a continual shift that we're never going to solve the problem, because as consumers get solutions, for example, landlords are also going to have access to better solutions. We recently moved and we're in a temporary apartment, and the landlord used a generative AI based solution to draft the contract for the apartment that we're currently in. And it is a horrible contract. I will just say it pulls in all kinds of just onerous restrictions and terms that are just really horrible, so that if someone signs this contract without protest, they are going to be pulled into this situation where they end up owing double the amount if they think they're going to go month to month after their term ends. The contract literally doubles the amount of the rent. So, generative AI is coming, it will help, but it will also continue the harms that we are seeing. So I'm not sure I really answered the question, but I think we have a lot of opportunity here if we're willing to harness the tools and allow it to help us solve some of these problems.
Shellie, I think you made some fantastic points, and I want to build on a couple of things. So I've been saying loudly for a long time that how this technology ends up getting used to by people to get for them to access legal help is completely outside of our control. And I'm so glad, to be honest with you, because solely my opinion, but I think the legal profession has done a terrible job of managing our responsibility for the monopoly that we hold on the provision of legal services. And so it is time for disruption. Again, just my opinion. But I have very little patience for people who want to rein the technology in ways that are intentionally designed to protect lawyers, right? It is one thing to talk about protecting people and helping them get good help. That is a worthy goal, and frankly, that is our primary obligation because of the monopoly we hold. However, if your motivation is anything but genuinely that, there is no place at this table for you. I will say that. So the horse is out of the barn, the genie is out of the bottle. Amazing opportunity, yes. But we face a lot of barriers. And so I want to dig in a little bit. And Shellie, you were really talking about barriers. Scheree, everyone has hit on it, but I want to address this kind of forthright. So Scheree, passing the mic to you in terms of we have this great opportunity in front of us if we are proactive and intentional and follow our true foundational ethical obligations as the providers of legal help. But we face barriers. And I'd love to dig in a little bit too, like what are genuinely valid barriers and what are barriers that are not valid? Because I see at least a couple of different categories there.
So barriers to to adopting the technology?
Yeah, and to really having technology scale access to help
Access to justice. Okay.
in ways that are appropriate. Because Amanda, I will also point out, Amanda has shared with us, and I think that this is consistent with anyone who's provided legal help, that ultimately people do want to talk to a person, right? So so it's kind of holding both as possible. But if we agree that technology is going to be critical to an expansion that the approximately 1.38 million licensed lawyers in the US will never be able to achieve simply as human lawyers working without any kind of empowerment or amplification of technology, what the scale opportunity exists, what barriers are there, and what are barriers that are worthy of us really addressing intentionally, and what are kind of smoke and mirror barriers?
I think the biggest barrier as a provider is funding and sustainability. And that's a real barrier. So, reliance, I think, on short-term or restricted grants, it limits our ability to innovate, to create sustainable solutions. It causes also duplication of efforts because we're all sort of competing for the same limited funding that's out there, and we're all kind of working towards building something similar, which is why we share a lot of the work that we do with the hope that you don't necessarily have to start from scratch or duplicate. You can build on what we're building, make it even better, right? So I think, the funding issue, the restricted funding that we have to operate within, it makes that a huge barrier for a lot of programs. And not all programs are equal. You take a program the size of Legal Aid of North Carolina, or even programs in other states that are bigger and more well-resourced than ours, we're going to have the capacity to do more things than a smaller program that is not as well-resourced, right? And we're going to have the ability to assign somebody like me. And this is my job, Chief Innovation Officer. I get to do this. I get to focus on this 100% of the time. Before our current CEO came in, if I were to do what I'm doing now, which I used to do, I would have to do it under the umbrella of a different role and be pulled doing casework, doing, managing the central intake, which I used to do, and still do this other work that I'm really passionate about around change management and integration of technology and all of that. So I think the funding creates all sorts of limitations within the and then, like I said, that long-term sustainability. We can't quickly adopt things that we can't sustain because we're reliant on certain pools of funding. If we adopt something, it has to be something that we can maintain beyond that short-term grant for a long period of time, because we have to maintain it and make the upgrades and changes. Another real barrier is that digital divide that still exists. A lot of our programs operate between urban and rural, program services and local offices or field offices. And so many clients that we're serving, they lack the devices necessary to access services. They lack internet. They lack the digital literacy now that needs to be there when you're talking about AI usage. And so that's a real barrier. How do you create solutions? How does an organization like mine that's saying we're very proactive in the tech space, very proactively build in AI tools, also address the issue of people who might live in our eastern part of the state where there are still dead zones, right? How do we deliver services? Well, it forces us to think of it in a different way. We have to look at what are some of the offline solutions that go along with that. But that is a real issue and barrier when it comes to technology adoption. The other barriers I think are just the capacity issues I mentioned. The things that are barriers that people have are their own limitations, right? I think as attorneys, we're trained to be risk averse. We're trained to think of change as bad, and especially tech change. And I think because of that, we sort of get into this process where we overthink the solution or we overthink the way to resolve something. With And again, I'll use Leah as an example. When we were building Leah, I don't know how many people told me I shouldn't build it because it's going to be a violation of UPL. It's going to cause all of these issues. People are not going to be able to get proper information from it. They're not going to use it. It's going to be it's too risky, right? That's not a real barrier. That to me is something that requires more thought, more planning, more consideration, and in terms of how you build it and how you manage the information and how we engage with the public. But at the end of the day, we are a law firm providing legal information. Yes, it's via chatbot, but it's no different than me putting that on our webpage. But we're a law firm, so the tool is being built by lawyers, managed by lawyers, maintained by lawyers, being vetted by lawyers, reviewed by lawyers. I don't know how much more we could have done to ensure that it was safe and reliable and accurate and all those things. But yet there was this perception that even though all of those checks were in place, at every single point there was a lawyer reviewing everything that was being done, we were told it is not going to be reliable. It's not going to be safe. We're engaging in UPL. We're doing all that. To me is one of those false barriers that we put on ourselves as a legal professional. It doesn't exist in other industries. You look at the medical field, and they're willing to look beyond the doctor as sort of the purveyor of information and the one that can provide care, or in this case, legal services to somebody who needs help, right? For me, the chatbot, it's regurgitating the same information that's on our website. It's not doing anything different. The information that's on our website, we can take issue with it, whether it's accurate or not, but we wouldn't know that. In years past, we would never know. Somebody would go on our website, they would pull the information, they would take it. We'd have no idea what they would use it and how they would use it, where they would go with it, how many other people they would share it with and have their own interpretation of what it says, right? With the chatbot is carefully monitored in a way that our resources were never monitored. But yet there's this higher risk that's put on the bot that we never placed on the information that was just publicly available for anybody to access. So again, I think those are some of the ways that we create barriers that are not real barriers. They're just based on fears and hesitancy and, you know, sometimes a legitimate concern. I'm not going to downplay that there are legitimate concerns, but I think those are things that we have to overcome in some ways, because I don't remember who said it, but the horse has sort of left the barn already, and we can't rein we can't rein it back in. So either we're going to take control of it as the legal the person who is responsible for legal information in as lawyers, and say, all right, we're going to take control. We're going to ensure that whatever is being built and put out in the public is safe, is accurate, is reliable. Or we're going to stand back and watch it happen, but it's going to keep developing. You know, you're talking about companies that are building tools for a profit. So they're not going to stop just because we have concerns or fears or worries. They're just going to build the next great model. And the next great model could be the one that puts you at an even bigger disadvantage because we haven't taken the time to learn and understand and grow and adapt with it. So that's where I stand.
Yeah. So I want to make one quick point. The amount of money being funneled in to the creation of these large language models, especially the frontier models, if we as legal profession think that we're somehow ever going to be able to stop the development of whatever one of these companies thinks is in their best interest for profit purposes, we have lost our collective minds. It will not happen. Just saying that. So I'm going to pass the mic to Amanda. Amanda, would you bring us home with anything you'd like to add about the barriers to really leveraging technology in a meaningful way to scale access to justice? Then we'll move to questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo what Scheree says about funding. That's just obvious. As a former legal aid attorney, there's no way that without funding to do this specifically, we'd be able to make these types of advancements. You know, like if I'm trying to defend eviction cases in court and then, you know, create a chatbot, it's just not realistic. So having dedicated resources for this is super important. But I think I alluded to earlier, sort of the regulatory environment that we're in is I really see is like one of the biggest problems, not just the regulatory piece, but also just in how we define the things that we're doing as a legal profession. You know, we're still grappling with the concept of what is the unauthorized practice of law, which is actually insane to me, that we can't like come up with an agreement on that and then find out, okay, where do we want to move with this? Where can we move with this? And I always I too also think that there is sort of this general conversation about like non-lawyer ownership that's in that like regulatory like 5.5 rules of ethics, where the argument is that for UPL, a lawyer is the only person that can have the judgment in order to help people navigate their legal issue with, in terms of UPL. But when it comes to like non-lawyer ownership, which, there's a lot of debate around whether or not that is actually good for access. But in terms of being able to bring in outside funding for new tools, that's not allowed because external factors might influence a lawyer who supposedly has this, incredible, end all be all sense of judgment. So I'm just confused about how we're applying things. And I'm really not, because it's ultimately coming from a place of protectionism, and I understand that. But the reality is like we have to get a grip on this access to justice problem because it's getting bigger naturally. But even as Shellie alluded to in her example, the scales are tipping, like where there's money going into the development of these tools for adversarial processes that affect folks that have, like typical access to justice issues. It's going to get worse. The disparity and the divide is getting bigger and bigger. So we've got to get a grip on this and get a grip on ourselves. But those are just a couple. There really are a lot, but I know we're kind of closing in on time.
Can I add one last thing? It's part of the reason we decided to start with a public-facing tool is because as you look around, most of the tools that are being built for lawyers and to support legal work, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. And people in our firm would welcome all those tools as well. But there was nothing being created to help people access legal services better, legal information easier or quicker. And when you think about that access gap, I mean, if you can't even access information to know what your rights are, then you can forget about accessing the courts, right? You don't even know how to get to a lawyer or even understand what your legal issue is or what your legal rights are. Then that barrier between that and getting to the court just becomes greater. And so that's why we decided to start with the customer facing solution or client facing solution, because we gotta close that gap as well.
Thank you, Scheree, for bringing us home. I think, as Tom pointed out in the chat, I think we have reached the end.
There's so
So
much more. There's
I
so
know,
much
I know.
more.
Like I have like 20 more questions to ask, but we touched on so much, and I think we were able to dig a little bit deeper into some of these points, which hopefully the folks watching really appreciated. I see some celebratory emojis going up. Thank you all for hanging in there and paying such close attention for the past hour. I'm going to hand the mic to Tom now and let him close us out.
Thanks so much, Kat, and thanks to all of our panelists, Shellie, Amanda, Scheree, everyone. Didn't they do an amazing job? Wasn't this a fantastic discussion? There's so much to talk about for A to J, and yeah, thank you so much for all those emojis. I always love when those come up. And thank you to ARAG Legal Insurance for sponsoring our session. Remember, the American Legal Technology Awards is coming to Boston. It's going to be at Suffolk Law School, October 15th, and it's going to be a fantastic time. So if you happen to be going to CleoCon, why not make a party of it the day before? It's been, some people call it Law Prom or the Oscars of Legal Innovation. It's definitely a good time. And we also have the State of the Industry panel coming up on October 7th. So please register for that if you'd like to attend. And Kat, I'll give you the last word, but thank you so much for leading us today.
Thank you, Tom. And I'll just thank Amanda, Shellie, and Scheree again. We have such incredible opportunity, and I think the future is so incredibly bright because we have geniuses like you helping lead us into the future that we want to see. So here is to being proactive innovators across access to justice.